Hi, I'm Dave Kelmer, and welcome to another segment of Veterans News. We have a special guest today with us in the studio, all the way from the East Los Angeles Vet Center, the director, Dr. Jack Steingart. We'll be talking to him momentarily, but he has a very illustrious background and has been at a vet center for 10 years. For your information, the Vet Center program started in 1979. It began with returning Vietnam veterans and the need for psychological counseling. Today, there are approximately 210 vet centers throughout the country, Hawaii, and Alaska. As the team leader, Dr. Steingart is in charge of the counselors at his vet center, as is the configuration of all of vet centers where you live also. There's generally a team leader, 2 counselors, and an office manager. And that's the basic configuration. The vet centers, I might add, are in the community. They are not on hospital grounds, on VA hospital grounds. And they're in the community because when they were opened, it was thought to be the veterans from Vietnam would more likely want to attend them as opposed to going to the bureaucratic veterans hospitals. So they are in the community, as in all cases with them, with the exception of 1 or 2 throughout the country. Thanks for sticking around, gang. Welcome back. And once again, as promised, we have Dr. Jack Steingart with us today. I mentioned before minimally about his background. He was a police psychologist and he was an industrial psychologist. He did work back in the 60s with the Department of Veterans Affairs, with returning Vietnam veterans early in their return from service. So without further ado, Dr. Jack Steingart. Jack, how are you? How you doing? Good to see you. I'm glad you could make it. I'm really glad you could make the trip over here.
Likewise, I'm pleased to be here, really.
Yeah, good. Dr. Jack, as we like to call Dr. Jack, and he doesn't mind that.
No, I prefer it. It's easier than the last name.
You're right. It's friendlier, too. What are you seeing as the director of the Vet Center with regard to returning Iraqi veterans? What are you seeing from a psychological standpoint that our viewers are going to see in their returning sons and husbands and fathers and the veterans themselves? Because what you say is very important, because it lets them know that whatever they may be feeling isn't different or new or unusual for a combat veteran. So what do you see with returning Iraqi veterans?
Well, one of the things that strikes me is the fact that all of them, or a very high percentage of them, have had exposure to combat without necessarily having been in combat units. Because of the insurgency and the fact that you can get wiped out anywhere in Iraq, the whole place is a war zone. So, I'm treating young women who are truck drivers, who've had exposure to, catastrophic events that would rival the experiences of people in Vietnam and, the Korean War. And the thing is that they're in, support services or support troops. So that I would say, by and large, the people who've been in Iraq have all been exposed to a lot of trauma and all seem to experience a great deal of the symptoms that you typically associate with PTSD.
Okay.
So it's a different ballgame, and right now the estimates are that it's 25% of the troops are going to come down with the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress disorder.
I know it's very high. It's anticipated to be very high with the returning veterans and the reserves, yes.
Absolutely. So I think that to me is the difference. That if you don't mind my sharing with you some of my own observations.
Please do.
Contrasting it with like the Korean War and Vietnam and the Iraq War. Well, when I was in Korea and I was doing search and recovery work as a first lieutenant, I would do debriefings when platoons would come back from missions, try to find out where the missing in action were and what have you, so that we can go out and see if we could find them. Well, when they got back, south of when we were in the 38th parallel,
Right.
it was a safe zone.
Right.
They could relax. You could interview them. They really felt that there was no threat. It's only when you went into what is now the DMZ and further north
Right.
that you were anxious. There was an enemy there. You experienced all the potential threat, either getting shot directly or walking into a minefield, that type of thing. But when you got back, hey, all that pressure's relieved. Well, that wasn't the case in Vietnam.
Right.
It was like for the combat soldier, there was no safe zone. Very hard to define where the lines were, if there were any. If you went to a village, you weren't sure that the villages were friendly. So there was a constant anxiety and exposure to a hostile environment. Okay. Now, in Iraq, I think it's expanded even more so. I mean, there's a lot of similarity for the combat soldier. He's got to be worried about fighting, a direct, in the initial stages, an organized army, then an insurgency, hostile villages. Now it's expanded to where the insurgency is now targeting non-combat troops.
Right.
So now everybody is being exposed, everybody's being traumatized, and everybody is experiencing a great deal of anxiety in a very ambiguous situation. So you do that for a full tour where you are experiencing it day in and day out, you're going to be traumatized.
Something you said was very interesting, and that is that in Iraq you can be exposed to a combat situation and not be in combat. I want to take a break and come right back because this is very important, and I want everybody to understand what you said about being exposed to combat and not be in a combat zone. Thanks very much. Stick with us. We'll be right back. Thanks for sticking around and coming back. As promised, I want to ask Dr. Jack, a comment he made was you can experience combat and not be in a combat zone.
Sure. Yeah. For example, you read about the Marines doing another expedition there, counterinsurgency attack on Fallujah. Okay. Well, you can expect the Marines to run into the insurgency, have direct contact with them, have firefights, etc. But then you have all the support units. Everybody's got to support them, provide ammunition, food, you name it. The insurgency has made a point. Part of their tactics is to attack these people and engage them in battle on the way there.
Okay.
The thing is that you do not know where they are.
Right.
They mingle with the villages. You're going through a town. The next thing you know, a vehicle in front of you gets blown up. You stop. You got to get the wounded out. Then they begin firing on you, and they're out of there before the gunships get there. So that is part of the tactics. So the support troops are constantly running into combat situations.
Another issue,
Sure.
the origin, the whole entity of what PTSD is and about, so that you will know what PTSD is about also.
It requires, some a certain amount of criteria. First of all, you have to experience, traumatic event,
Right.
which is life-threatening, okay, and not only life-threatening, but so overwhelming that it's terrifying, and it produces inside you a fear of being killed at the moment, and a high degree of emotional arousal that's involved with it, along with fears of helplessness and the thought, particularly of, hey, I'm going to be killed. That is the trauma.
Okay.
Unless you have that kind of a trauma, it doesn't neatly fit into a diagnosis of PTSD.
Okay.
So if you were in the military and you were sitting in a bunker and you experienced some incoming fire, but hey, nobody was hurt, nobody was killed, you were not threatened that's not a traumatic event, at least from a military point of view. Otherwise, everybody would have it.
Right.
Okay.
Well, how far back does post-traumatic stress disorder go, even under another name? If it was something with a different name. Now, I remember from the Civil War, it was called sunstroke, and later soldier's heart.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And we know in the First World War, shell shock.
Okay.
And then into the Second World War,
combat fatigue.
And then Korea, it was battle fatigue.
Okay,
but it's all the same, only a different name.
There's just different names, and what happens is it takes a while to be able to see the similarity. Before something can be diagnosed as a disorder, it has to have a symptomatology, okay, that is consistent, that you see in everybody who has experienced this. And that's what they have found. For example, once somebody has experienced this traumatic event, okay, the first thing they try to do is, some coping mechanisms, some numbing, some trying to forget what it was all about. And as much as they like to, this event that induced so much intense fear, horror, helplessness, and what have you, has some pretty lasting effects. A lot of people talk about PTSD being a trauma to the memory, in the sense that that traumatic event stays with you.
Okay.
It becomes a memory trace and very difficult to get rid of. And in fact, what happens is you have all of these intrusive recollections. Anything that might be associated with the event, such as you're in Vietnam, it was raining, you're in a rice paddy, you're smelling gunpowder, you're in a firefight. Any of these stimuli will re-trigger that event. So what you get is an intrusive thought coming back.
Got
it. And all of a sudden, I'm back in combat.
So this is what we know as flashbacks.
Exactly, Dave.
Right.
It's a flashback, and it could be
triggered
anywhere.
Right.
And the other bad effect is that you can have sleep disorders. Here you are trying to get some rest, and the next thing you know, you've got this bad memory. It gets back into you try to the body, the psyche tries to keep it down below, repress it. But while you're sleeping, it comes into the semi-consciousness. You have some really bad dreams, nightmares. You can't sleep. You start actually getting so involved, you may start screaming, yelling, sweating, because it is an anxiety disorder. So all of the characteristics of a typical anxiety operate when you're experiencing any of the symptoms of PTSD.
Outstanding. You're great. I'm glad you're on the show. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. Stick with us. Welcome back. Dave Culmer once again with my guest, Dr. Jack Steingart. And Dr. Steingart just gave us an exquisite explanation of post-traumatic stress disorder. What I want to know is it treatable? Is PTSD treatable? Dr. Jack, can you answer that question for me?
Well, I think it is treatable, Dave, but I think that the early intervention, to me, is a primary factor which really enhances treatment. If left untreated, then it's much more difficult to treat someone much later. Now, to their credit, the military today has embedded psychological teams with the units, and they perform critical incident stress debriefings when the unit faces, combat, has undergone some traumatic events, people are traumatized, so they, right then and there in the field, get in there.
So this is while on active duty that the military is in fact doing this prior to veterans or military people being separated from active duty.
Absolutely.
Oh, great. And this is good.
Yeah, they're doing that now so the people recognize that they can separate those who have much more difficulty with them, give them more extended treatment, etc. I think that the military recognizes that it happens even to the best of people, and that early intervention keeps a soldier, a Marine, ready for combat because you've taken care of his needs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everybody can get scared to death, so it's not as if even the bravest of us can succumb to that. So,
Sure.
The thing is, I think what they're doing now is a lot better than what they did before, which was nothing.
Absolutely.
World War II, there were some efforts to do debriefings, but we had such massive demobilization
Right.
that
There were about how many people in World War
total
II?
World War II, 16 million people.
16 million people.
People had gone through, they probably demobilized half of them.
Right.
After the war, everybody wanted to go home.
Okay.
So there was just no time, no resources, and what have you, to do debriefings, evaluations of people. So they went home, and they were encouraged to, quote, go to the VA.
Right.
Most of them didn't. The same thing with the Korean War, same thing with the Vietnam War.
Right.
Okay? That, yes, you could say the services were available because you told them to go to the VA, but people were not educated what to look for.
Right. Okay.
So it was left untreated, and it just got worse. I mean, they had other pressures. They wanted to get married, go to work, the ordinary facts of life. Today, we recognize it happens. You do early intervention, you get people into treatment, and then if the early interventions don't work and it's a more profound trauma, then you can get into more extended treatment.
Okay.
In the vet center, one of the things they are doing is debriefings when people are leaving and encouraging people to get into treatment at the vet center, go into the outpatient clinics, go to the medical centers and what have you, and the vet centers are there doing the transition assistance programs.
Right.
Letting veterans know that. Now, is it a magical cure? No. Most guys are sitting there wanting to get discharged. They're not even listening. So when they come home, you got to do it one more time.
Pardon me, Dr. Jack, but one of the things that rings through and through everything you're saying is early treatment.
Yes.
Much the same as a knee, a kidney, a shoulder, a back, arthritic. When the doctor says, you should have seen me 6 months ago, I could have saved you. To be humorous, but it's early treatment. Much the same as any other medical problem.
No, exactly. Because if it's left untreated, you have symptoms that get in the way of your being able to perform, the tasks that are required of the life cycle. Okay? If you can't hold down a job and you get fired because your PTSD symptoms get in the way,
right.
Well, getting fired from successive jobs just makes you feel even worse.
Right.
Okay?
Sure.
It may exacerbate the symptoms even more so.
Even worse.
So then when they finally get into treatment, this guy's had a history of 20 years of alcoholism, firings from job, failed marriages, etc. Hey, you've got a heck of a lot more treatment to do here because you've got a lot of baggage to take care of.
There's another...
Early in the game, much easier.
One other element that just came to mind is everybody feels like they're the only one going through this. Dr. Jack, I can't thank you enough. Listen, stay with us for the next episode of Veterans News. We're going to have some real good news with regard to the significant others, the wives, the mothers, the daughters, the sweethearts of returning veterans. So long, Dave Culmer out.